Well, it's another week in the middle of the season after Pentecost, in the year of the Gospel of Luke, which means I'm talking about money again. Because, see, there's this thing about Luke's Gospel. It's not good to read Luke's Gospel and have money at all. And no one really wants to talk about money. And no one wants to hear somebody talk about money. But it's precisely for this reason that I'm really glad that I continue to follow the lectionary, these 3-year set of readings that we participate with. The big reason is it helps me feel like we're participating in the life of the broader church, because there's a whole bunch of other Christians around the world who are hearing these exact same readings. So congrats, you get to suffer with them. But the other reason why I really like following the lectionary is it forces me to preach on things that I don't want to talk about. Because this week Jesus continues in the theme of don't pay more attention to your money than you do to God. And this time he puts an interesting little spin on it. See, he tells this parable about this rich guy. And the rich guy doesn't merit a name, but let's call him Richard, because he's a rich guy. Sure, why not? I just don't want to keep saying rich man or rich fellow, so I'm just going to call him Richard. So Richard, it's a good Jewish name, Richard. I didn't think this one through very well. And then there's this fellow named Lazarus. Now, Richard was apparently quite obvious in showing off that he had money. He used to walk around in the finest clothes and, basically wanted people to know that he was rich. And Lazarus would hang out at Richard's front gate and beg, just hoping that he can get some scraps from the dinner table. And it just so happened that both of these men died right around the same time. But in the hereafter, their lives were reversed. Lazarus found himself at Abraham's side, which is, the standard euphemism for paradise. While the rich man, he wasn't quite so lucky. The translation that we had, it says the word as hell, but that brings up connotations for us. It's better to think of it as Hades, if you remember your Greek mythology. See, if you remember your Greek mythology, and because this was written in Greek, it's actually kind of helpful. If you were good, you went to paradise, and it was fun and pleasant, and there were fields and flowers and dainty things, I'd imagine. Or you end up in Hades, where you are basically tortured. And your torture fits your penalty. Like the guy that rolled the rock all the way up the thing until he got to the very top, and then it fell back down on him. Sisyphus. So the rich man finds himself in torment, and Lazarus finds himself, not. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit odd, and you have to remember that Jesus is telling a parable, because I've seen people try to make doctrine out of this parable, and it never really goes well. Because while there is apparently the possibility of interaction between paradise and Hades, no one can actually do anything about it, which doesn't seem like the greatest design idea, for there to allow interaction but neither person be able to do anything about it. Because you end up with conversations like the one that Abraham had with the rich man, where the rich man cries out and says, "Father Abraham, send Lazarus to give me a drop of water or something to make this better." And Abraham's response is just, if it doesn't make you giggle, you're reading it wrong. Because he goes, Richard, you had plenty of opportunity to, enjoy life and not be a bad person, but you didn't. And, so while you received your reward on earth, now Lazarus is getting rewarded now, and where Lazarus had a not so great life on earth, you're having a not so great life now. And oh, by the way, even if we wanted to, we actually couldn't do anything for you because there's a giant chasm in the middle. It's just like, he's not even going to be nice about it. He just goes, no, I'm not going to help you, and even if I wanted to, I couldn't. At this point, the rich man, for probably the first time in his life, which is awkward to say this because he, is dead, realized that he might actually care about someone more than he cares about himself. So he tried to get Lazarus to go back and say hi to his 5 brothers so that they could avoid the torment that he's facing. It's actually, maybe not a bad plan. It's like, okay, so you can't go from paradise to Hades, but maybe you can go from paradise back to earth and say hi to my brothers. Now, Abraham has a really interesting response that I'm actually not going to talk about very much because I could spend a sermon just talking about this. He says, they have Moses and the prophets, let them listen to them. And Richard then says, no, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. And then Abraham says, if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Now, it's interesting that Jesus said this because what, of course, happens, the people that didn't believe Jesus before he rose from the dead didn't believe him after he rose from the dead. And while that's kind of a big deal, and that's a really interesting phrase, we're going to pay more attention to the bit that we don't want to deal with. And I'm probably saying it because it's the bit that we don't want to deal with. So I'm kind of figuring that maybe we need to hear it. You see, we get yet another warning about how we deal with our wealth. And Amos 6 and 1 Timothy 6 are even more blunt than Jesus. Because 1 Timothy says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And then Amos basically shows what a group that loves money more than anything else will do. A group of people more concerned with their own comfort and well-being than the comfort and well-being of others. And Amos prophesies that they'll be the first to go into exile. Not a very good end. Of course, Paul also writes in 1 Timothy that people who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. But you, man of God, flee from all this and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. See, that's what really this whole set of readings for the past couple weeks is about. Because it's not being arrogant or putting your hope in wealth, but instead to put your hope in God, who, as Paul says, richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. And then, of course, Paul tells us exactly what to do with the things that we have. Command them, being those with wealth, to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. As I said last week, it's not that being rich is inherently bad, even though Luke sometimes makes it sound that way. It's that the people who tend to be rich also tend to be self-serving with their wealth. Because when you serve only money, it leads to destruction. It leads to eternal destruction for the person and temporal destruction for everyone who gets in the way of them and their money. How often have we seen it where someone rich cuts costs in one place, or cuts salaries, or cuts health benefits, or and so on, just to save them a buck, but ruins the lives of those around them. Instead, we are called to seek after true riches, the riches that are found in God and not in money. Instead of parading around like the rich man and showing off how wealthy we are, what if we helped the Lazaruses that we came across? What if we gave them food, shelter, and clothing? What if we actually did put our neighbor in front of ourselves? That's the way to use wealth. Not in service to wealth, but in service to God. To use it to build others up and to bless them as God has blessed us.